Welcome to Banyen Books, Branches of Wisdom, celebrating the joy of bright ideas and heartful lifelong learning. Branches of Wisdom is a series of intimate conversations with the world's most influential authors and visionaries. We explore spirituality and the human mind, ecology and culture. Most episodes are recorded with a live audience. You can join our live events and submit questions to your favorite guests. Check out our upcoming schedule at banyen.com. Since 1970, Banyen Books has been a rich oasis at the crossroads of wisdom and philosophy, offering resources for humanity's evolving paths. We're a locally owned, independent bookstore in the heart of Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. Visit us in person or shop online at banyen.com. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews for the podcast. And now, enjoy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Steele, the events manager for Banyen Books and Sound. Today, we're delighted to be hosting Michele Kambolis in conversation with Nat Boltt on Dr. Kambolis's book, When Women Rise, Everyday Practices to Strengthen Your Mind, Body, and Soul. Dr. Michele Kambolis is an acclaimed author and speaker who has been featured on Good Morning America, HuffPost Live, Goop, and Raw Beauty Talks. She holds a PhD in mind-body medicine. She has been a clinical counselor for more than 20 years, and her evidence-based resources will set you on a path of self-healing, inner wisdom, and profound mind-body health. Her first book, Generation Stressed, Play-Based Tools to Help Your Child Overcome Anxiety, was widely praised by readers and critics alike. Her new book, When Women Rise, Everyday Practices to Strengthen Your Mind, Body, and Soul, is a timely, transformative, and inspiring guide for women who want to bring more joy, power, and peace into their lives. It invites every woman to nurture her inner wisdom and strength, transcend the prevailing fears of our time, and raise into her highest well-being. Of this new book, Dr. Shefali has written, Simply Transformative. This book lights a path of self-discovery, peace, and self-compassion. Tara Brach has said, this empowering book is full of wisdom, inspiration, and practices that undo the limiting conditioning of a lifetime. And I'm not sure if I pronounced this correct, Mayim Bialik, I love her humor, I just can't remember how to pronounce her name, writes, Michele provides excellent scientifically sound techniques to gently facilitate optimal growth. You can find more about her work at michelekambolis.com. Now about Nat Boltt. Nat Boltt is an internationally renowned director, writer, and actor. Highlights of her acting career include Riverdale, where she has played villain Penelope Blossom for 5 seasons, 24 Hours to Live with Ethan Hawke, Golden Globe winner District 9, and the multi-award winning BBC classic Inspector George Gently. A highly respected television and feature film director, she is currently directing the film Holy Days. Nat Boltt is an outspoken defender of human and environmental rights and has a passionate following in the millions. You can find her on Instagram at @NatBoltt. Without further ado, it's a great honor to welcome you both. I turn it over to you, Michele Kambolis and Nat Boltt.
Thank you so much, Jacob and Banyen Books, for having me. Hi, Michele.
Hi. Yes, thank you, Jacob and Nat. Thank you so much for being here with me and diving into all of the practices that are going to support us towards our highest well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, we're going to really get into your beautiful book, When Women Rise. But to begin with, why don't we do what you talk about in your book to help us with anxiety and much more, and start off with a meditation that you'll lead.
I'd love to start with a short meditation just to welcome one another. And this is a meditation inspired by teacher and activist Conda Mason. For those who are completely new to meditation, don't worry, I'll walk you through every step, and we'll start by just having you go ahead and settle in where you are, and I'll welcome you in with the sound of the gong, and you can just allow the sound to wash over you. This is just welcoming each of us to our Buddha seat. And just taking a moment now to settle in, and settling into the body. You might close your eyes or leave them open slightly, just resting the gaze lightly on the space in front of you. And there is no wrong way to be here. Just welcoming yourself into the moment. And breathing through the nose if you're able, and just noticing the sensation of the breath, a natural breath. And the natural inhale and the natural exhale. And noticing too the sensations in the body. You might notice places where you feel open or closed, warm or cool. Might notice places that feel a sense of tension or maybe even pain. And just noticing those now with non-judgment, just allowing whatever may be arising to meet your awareness. And softening at the chest, the heart center. And know that every part of you is welcomed here. We welcome all of the backgrounds and the languages that you bring. We welcome your diverse races and ethnic groups. All sexual orientations and faiths. And together, let us welcome all genders. We welcome your diverse bodies and abilities, and people of all ages. And as you're taking in this welcoming, just see if you can let the mind rest in stillness to whatever degree. Letting go, letting go. We welcome those who are single or married, parents, non-parents. We welcome all of you. And we welcome all of your emotions, whatever they may be. Your worries or fear, your joy. You might just notice now whatever emotions are there to be felt and know that they're welcomed. And let us welcome each other with a heart of unwavering openness and respect. And you might just set a light intention for this time of how you like to meet yourself in this moment. This time of us gathering together. And we'll close with the sound of the gong. And opening your eyes when you're ready, and give yourself a stretch if you need.
Thanks, Michele.
And you can bring the meditation with you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great segue into this chat, because of course, you know, there's always so much on our minds. It's hard to sit still sometimes. We'll speak more about it, of course, but you know, every single time you meditate is like every single time you do yoga. It's different depending on what's happening in your day, where you're at in your body, where you're at in your life. And the point is that there's nothing to be achieved. It's just a practice. And what I noticed sitting with you and meditating is the wonderful quality and effect of your voice. And I think that's something people will get such a treat from in this book, because you have spent so much energy, effort, thought, and spirit on creating When Women Rise, which is not just a book, it is a full experience. It's a whole journey and an adventure. But before,
Definitely a journey and adventure writing it.
Yeah, because you know, it's such it's so clearly laid out. And that's the thing, you know, if I liken it to my own world of film and television making, the best projects, the best stories are always the ones that seem easy, that seem effortless. And your book is so beautifully laid out. It's so logical. It's so clear that it seems effortless. So I have no doubt that it was not effortless putting it together, because yeah, you really have to go through every single detail before you can produce something like your wonderful book. I just wanted to start off by talking about how we know each other. So yeah, I came to see you with my husband, and it was a difficult time in our relationship. And seeing you and your practice of saying, what are you noticing, was so useful. That I actually stayed, and you were my personal therapist for a little while, and then we became friends. And I think your voice and the way that you are, and the whole feeling of non-judgment but incredible relaxation, was so vital to being able to deal with that time of my life. Even my child came to you when he was only about 10, and he was having anxiety, and came out smiling and with a cookie. And so, yeah, you've been incredibly helpful to our whole family. And yeah, I'm lucky enough to call you friend now.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been a therapist for 25 years, and it's really unusual to become friends with a client, and so you have to wait this certain period of time, and And
oh, that was just it.
yeah, there wasn't any sort of intention around that. And then we kind of came together years later and have, yeah, I mean, I just so appreciate well, this really special connection and synergy. And so for us to be able to, now share in this discussion with other people with a really committed interest towards sharing the kinds of practices that you've been a benefactor of and I've been a benefactor of. And I think that's, I mean, just such like the beauty of having had our own kind of transformational experiences with practices like meditation and breath work and contemplative work to then be able to in turn share that with others who, I mean, gosh, we don't have to look very far to see the struggle in this human family.
Yeah, and you've brought it all together so beautifully, your experience and wisdom, having researched and experienced yourself and sought out globally so many different avenues of finding help for anxiety and for this human condition that you have brought together so wonderfully. I actually wanted to because introductions are always such an important thing. I do a lot of interviews, and sometimes you assume people know what you have in your mind and what you've experienced, but for the people who don't have When Women Rise in their hands, you sum it up so nicely in your introduction, just so people know. I'm quoting here: you'll find 18 meditations as well as imagery exercises, breathing techniques, mantras, biofeedback strategies, mindfulness practices, and an entire system predicated on mind-body health and self-knowing. These evidence-based practices are an all-encompassing guide deeply rooted in neuroscience, psychology, and integrative medicine. Some exercises have their own QR code that leads to a recording. And it's so fun, to kind of go through that experience of reading and then use your phone and go, and the QR code takes me to you and your voice and this meditation, because I've never done that before. And I found it like you focus on the words and then you have a little adventure out, and then you might leave it at that for the day, or you might come back and go on the next adventure. So that's really fun. And yes, I hope everybody who gets this book enjoys the same.
It was really important to me that the practices were accessible. And so many women, those who identify as women, talk about how incredibly busy their lives are and how hard it is to integrate the practices that really bring them home to self and are really, soothing to the limbic system and help them to be able to, really kind of come home to their own heart space. And there's also a lot of guilt around self-care and creating that time space to be able to do the kinds of things that are really going to keep us well. And so the QR codes were kind of a way to make it easier. So if you can be in the parking lot and waiting for your child to come out of practice, and you can do, 5 minutes of Sudarshan Kriya, regulated breathing to calm your nervous system, that's wonderful. So it was really important to me that the tools are accessible.
Absolutely, using current tech, and we've all become so kind of tech savvy over the last 2-3 years. So exactly, you don't have to go and search it out yourself. It's all right there. Everybody, well, not everybody, but many people have a smartphone and know how to use QR codes. And so it is right there. Like you say, you can be anywhere and tap into this world. And you have touched on why you wrote the book right there, speaking of how hard it is to look after ourselves. So do you want to, go straight into that, Michele? Why did you write When Women Rise?
Well, I'd been planning on writing a book for women on the topic of anxiety for a while, and then COVID hit. And then it felt really urgent. And so many women tell me how utterly exhausted they feel by this externally focused culture of doing and striving and proving and comparing and competing. And they often describe that their bodies are really mired in anxiety and the impact of chronic stress, nervous systems taxed, and many feel disconnected from themselves and those in their lives, and more than anything, they want a path to greater joy and inner peace and a wiser way. So, I wanted those who identify as women to have a scientifically supported roadmap to heal and strengthen and support their mind-body systems so they can empower themselves, so we can empower ourselves and rise into our highest well-being. So
yeah, I mean, this quote really struck me yesterday. I was with a bunch of incredibly stressed out people in LA because, that being my world of directing and acting. And, like so many, they've had their world put on hold due to COVID. And I've found people who have just, they're so highly strung at this point, but especially in that environment, which is so competitive and so comparative. It's so comparative. And this quote here from your book: think of this process as an invitation to let go of the Western pattern of pushing, forcing, and chasing. Pushing, forcing, and chasing. Like, is that not your life? It's my life. The hustle, the endless hustle, because when is the hustle ever over? There is no finish line. So the Western pattern of pushing, forcing, and chasing, and begin to challenge the unexamined patterns that interfere with your ability to be fully present to the richness of your life as it is right now. And that is the thing, isn't it? You're either depressed about what has happened in the past, or you're anxious about what might be awaiting you or not awaiting you in the future. And our ability to just be here right now is so slim if we've been brought up in a Western culture. And, you talk about it being a feminist issue. That was the first thing that attracted me. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, I don't think that we can look at women's stress and anxiety without considering the gender-based barriers that lie in every realm of our lives. So, we know that women and girls in every country on our planet face discrimination, violence, financial and work inequity, and extraordinary challenges due to gender inequality. And if you're a Black, Indigenous, or woman of color, the barriers that you face are far worse. So that's why I say that stress is a feminist issue. And, women oftentimes grow up breathing the air of fear. We're actively taught from an early age to walk at home with a friend for protection. We park near well-lit doorways with, when we used keys, I remember having them clenched, defensively in my fingers on campus. And we hold our drinks in pubs out of fear of being drugged. And then we blame ourselves for being too nice when we're sexually harassed by our boss or a teacher. So, we navigate our lives in this way. And so, whether or not we're consciously aware of it, there is an unconscious undercurrent at all times, just based on the reality of what it means to be identified as female.
Yeah, and with those fears of, with the anxiety of being brought up with fear and often danger that you've been told, whether you've experienced it or not, that you've been told is there. There are also other anxieties or other stresses that it took me decades to recognize. Like, for instance, when you're working incredibly hard and you're comparing yourself as you do in Western society, and you see men being rewarded for their work, and somehow your career is not taking off in the same way or at the same time or at the same speed. And not always men versus women, but in certain circumstances, you think it's your fault, that you haven't done enough. And that's certainly my fault, that position where I think I must have failed in some way. And it's only much later, when I had a better view of the whole picture, that I realized, oh, yeah, those doors were never open to me. Well, and it's especially now that those doors are creaking open for women and other underrepresented minorities, not that women are a minority, but other underrepresented groups, that you realize, okay, so I was really banging my head against a wall at those times, and that creates all kinds of stress. I mean, it creates stress of, self-criticism. It creates financial stress, and so on. So yeah, I think that's very much a part of anxiety being a feminist and female issue, and it's worth taking on board very seriously now to try to counteract, and more importantly than that, to not pass it on to your children.
Yeah, we know that women are 1.5 times more likely to have anxiety disorder. And so, some researchers look at biological markers, but I think our cultural context really does tell a bigger story. Of course, men too face extraordinary levels of anxiety, but it's just important to kind of look at what the lived experience is of women in particular, as we look at just some of the gender-based barriers and difficulties that we face on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to touch on any of the anxiety that you've experienced in your life? I'm very happy to share a little about mine, because I think a lot of people don't, well, they assume that, on the outside we present this image as we do so terribly, especially, I mean, so horrifically and terribly, because it's so misleading in so many ways on social media or in whatever mask we wear. And underneath, of course, lies something quite different. I mean, for me, having insomnia was quite a life-changing experience. I brought that to you as well and just said, I don't know what it is, but I just don't sleep well, and I'm sure you've heard that so many times in your practice. Do you want to share about your experiences of anxiety?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of extraordinary that I'm able to even be here and speak in front of people, because when I was in my teens, I suddenly became aware that other people had a thought about me. So you have this surge in abstract thinking ability. And I went from this, kid who was pretty comfortable being on the public speaking team and the debate team, to suddenly just being riddled with social anxiety. And so I couldn't even put up my hand in class. And I can remember I was a figure skater, and I went out onto the ice, and I took my pose and waited for the music to start. And by the time the music started, I had forgotten every single step of the choreography that I had practiced hundreds of times over. And so that generalized anxiety and social anxiety started to mount. And by the time I was 18, I started to have panic attacks. Yeah. And then by the time I was 30, I had a panic attack that was so severe. I was driving across Lionsgate Bridge in Vancouver. I had both of my children with me, and I had a panic attack that was so severe that the muscles in my face and my hands seized, and I thought I was having a stroke. And so I ended up in the hospital. And it was at that point that I realized that the anxiety had gotten so out of hand that it was placing me and potentially my kids at risk. And so I started to really draw in practices in order to address not only what was happening within my limbic system, but also my thinking mind. And you talked a little bit about future-focused, fear-based thinking, or ruminating in the past. And I wasn't spending a lot of time wholeheartedly in the present. And so I committed to meditation a whole lot more. And I also went back to therapy and and did a lot of CBT and EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and really did everything that I could in order to develop a friendlier, well, first of all, unpack the trauma that was related to the anxiety, but also develop a more compassionate and friendlier relationship with my thinking mind, and discover ways to reassure my body so that it no longer, was constantly on the lookout for danger and so hypervigilant. So it took a lot of work.
Yeah, as it does. But so often you have no choice, right? Because if you ignore it long enough and you don't understand how the subconscious affects the body, that you find yourself completely cornered at some point going, I don't know what to do, but I can't go on. I mean, what happened to you on Lionsgate Bridge with 2 kids in the car, I can't imagine the horror, how you must have handled that. And then, having survived that, gone, this has got to end. And I think, for those suffering with anxiety, it's so comforting to hear that, because there are so many people doing this alone, so many women in particular who think they need to be able to handle these things. And you often can't, because you need the information to even begin. And what I love about your book is that you not only deal with the spiritual side and the emotional side, but you deal with the science of it all. So however, whichever mind you come from, whether it's you like the intellectual side or you prefer the more kind of layman's terms, anybody can follow when women rise and get a satisfaction of why the practices make sense, to really unwind that tightly wound spring that can be you. And so for people who are struggling with anxiety and they don't know where to begin, where would you begin?
Well, I like to start with the low-hanging fruit. So those are the really simple things that we can start right away that will likely have a fairly immediate impact. And so that means going straight to the body. And so one of the things that we look at, right away is a little bit of an inventory of how am I doing in terms of my sleep life? You had mentioned, that for yourself, and many women struggle to get enough sleep and the right kind of sleep to leave them feeling restored. So some things in place, pretty quickly, dimming the lights as the sun goes down, ensuring that we don't have too many lights on or aren't attached to screens, so that the body can kind of regulate the melatonin levels according to the light. And that's actually one of the things that interferes the most with our capacity to sleep. And then also allowing for some time in between the busyness of the day to, that time when we want the body to wind down. And so that might mean, integrating practices. There's progressive muscle relaxation and autogenic training and all kinds of cool things that you can do in order to support the body towards better rest. And then we look at diet, nutrition, the role of stimulants. How much coffee are you drinking?
Oh my goodness, it changed everything.
Alcohol, right? And how much sugar are you taking in? I was working with a client, and I tell the story of this client in the book.
Yeah.
And she was doing everything right. She had great sleep habits and was exercising regularly and out in nature and had supportive relationships and eating, nutrient dense live foods, and yet her anxiety, and didn't really have a trauma history or any family history of anxiety. Yeah. And then I discovered that she was drinking a lot of sugary coffee drinks in order to get through exams and her, busy schedule at university. And once she eliminated those, or at least titrated those down, her severe anxiety, I mean, we're talking really high levels of anxiety, completely dissipated. So it's just a little bit of a investigation in order to find out, well, what am I doing that's self-supporting, and what am I doing that may really be impacting my nervous system? We look at gut health, of course, because we know that gut health is also very associated with mood and anxiety levels. And so
yeah, I mean, you know, you say little things, but it's not a little thing when you talk about caffeine and alcohol, because there's such massive things. And I had that experience as well. And I think the hardest thing for me to let go of, particularly caffeine, was just the unwillingness to accept that as a younger person, when I was at college, whatever, that I could drink so much coffee and fall asleep. It was no problem. And eventually, you know, you just have to go, but I can't do that anymore. Same as alcohol, you used to be able to do this, but now you can't. And it's been so fascinating. I put up such a fight with my insomnia to give up even tea. I mean, I just became so sensitive to caffeine after I had a child. And I had one, and honestly, it shifted my physicality, my physical being so much that, you know, I just was a different person. And it took me just so many years to accept that I just couldn't handle caffeine. And I'm sure there are people out there who will go, but come on, it's just one cup of coffee, just a cup of tea. But that might not be, you know, other people might be able to handle that, or your younger self might have been able to handle that, but you can't now. So just try it. You know, I even find with coffee, it puts my thinking into a really negative cycle. I'll become hypercritical, and you just go, well, what is this crazy drug? Because when I don't have it, I have a much better day. Or if I just had one in the morning, no, you find the thing that works for you. And one of the other things I loved about one of the practices, because like I say, you've drawn from so many different sources of inspiration and brought the best bits together. One of them was, you know, pushing the heat from your center into your hands and feet, because it's the reverse of when you're nervous, your blood supply doesn't reach your hand and face and hand and feet, because it's staying in near your central most important organs to keep them safe. And so when you are having a panic, your hands and feet are freezing. And so if you notice that your hands and feet are freezing all the time, it's probably because you're in an extended period of anxiety. So to counteract the anxiety, you meditate and push the heat into your hands and feet. And in so doing, you relax yourself, because you're giving your body the message that it's okay to relax. And I thought, it can't be that simple. And then did it and went, oh, wow. Oh, wow. Yeah. So
very simple home-based biofeedback approaches that we can use. And the breath is the simplest one. You're talking about autogenic training, which is, yeah, I mean, incredible. We can increase the heat in our hands and our feet by 10 degrees. And that sends a message throughout our whole mind-body system that, you know, we're safe, and it's you know, very calming and yeah, a wonderful kind of, you know, state of being. It's sort of reteaching the body how to kind of disengage from that fight or flight response. But the breath is the simplest way, and we take 20,000 breaths a day, and that's 20,000 invitations to enter into the present moment. It's 20,000 invitations to be right here, right now.
Yes.
And we know that 50% of the time we're just not here. We're either thinking about the future, we're thinking about the past, and we're happiest and at the greatest amount of peace when we're in the moment, even if that's a difficult moment. So just to simply take a pause and come back to that anchor of the sensation of the breath, maybe the sensation at the nose, or the feeling at the belly, or the whole body breathing, just to enter into the beauty that is life as it is right now, is one of the most potent things that we can do in order to mitigate the impact of stress.
And I think that's a great segue into how important meditation is. For people who've never meditated. Michele, can you talk a little bit about how one would begin? Because all of these things that you talk about, that everything we've just mentioned and everything in the book, every single one you try not only has the benefits of the practice, but it also grows our awareness of our body. Because when you start, you really don't think you have any understanding of your body and how it works and how you could control it in terms of your limbic system. But then as you become more mindful of your body, then you develop a better relationship with it, and you create a much stronger mind-body connection. And of course, the most powerful is meditation. So do you want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I love about meditation is it really shows us what's there. And that might be pleasant and it might be unpleasant, but really it allows us to be in relationship with life as it is, right here, right now. And in time, we're able to develop a more welcoming, kinder relationship with the thinking mind, where, you know, we can observe thoughts as they arise and exist and fall away.
Yeah.
And so we don't get as caught up in the storyline. And so, and there is this greater, you know, attunement and awareness in terms of what's happening not only in the thinking mind, but also in our emotions and the sensations in the body, and helps us to kind of open up more sense portals so that we, you know, can see that, you know, it's not all about associating with our thoughts, that you know, we're actually a sensing, living, present being, and so, you know, with meditation, the myth is that we're going to close our eyes and turn off the thinking mind and disconnect and feel this incredible sense of peace. And
Only.
very quickly you realize, well, that's just not the case at all, that the mind doesn't shut off and it really loves to run amok. But in time you can just observe it and not add more.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we use an anchor. And so your anchor might be just coming back to the sensation of the breath and just tracking the breath. Trungpa Rinpoche, you know, would say, we need a toy to play with in order to come back, you know, right here, right now, and disengage from the thinking mind. And that toy can be the breath. And so we give the breath about 25% of attention, a little bit of extra attention on the out breath, and at the same time open awareness to sound and sensation and, you know, this embodied presence, as opposed to, you know, our typical tendency of like really over focusing on the thinking mind. So
yeah, and there are different things work for different people, right?
Well,
learning meditation.
There's different outcomes depending on the kind of meditation that you're doing. So that it's like, you know, calling every sport sports. Well, there's soccer and there's hockey and there's it's the same for meditation. There are many different forms of meditation, and some forms of meditation support focused attention. Others can support greater compassion and altruism, like metta meditation, and Tonglen really supports the development of compassion and kindness. So yeah, there's different outcomes depending on the kind of meditation that you're doing. So.
Yeah, you know what got me into meditation was I was struggling with my career in my 20s, and my husband said to me, well, since you have nothing to do and you're stressing about the fact that you have nothing to do, why don't you just learn to meditate? And you know,
learn to do nothing.
Yeah. And so I learned meditation. I went off to a course, and of course it's not nothing at all. But what I did notice was through sitting still and not hustling and faffing all the time, that actually the things that I desired finally had a chance to flow to me, because I wasn't making so much noise all the time. And it's amazing, you know, explaining that to people, and there's so much denial that could be possible. And I always think, you know, if you're constantly making noise, if you're constantly throwing stones, when do they rip into a lake? When do you ever get a chance for the ripples to come back to you? You have to be still. And it's been incredibly helpful in my career. So helpful, the most helpful. But you know, and the other thing that I wanted to mention, outside of, you know, all the great things that you've spoken about as well, compassion, more connectedness with your children, with your family, more time with your friends, a deeper understanding of integrity, a deeper connection to your gut feeling, your impulses, which helps you make better choices, but also memory. You know, so many people, myself very much included, find it hard to concentrate, even, you know, sitting down to read a book, or trying to, when you find that kind of swirling feeling, you know, sure, you can put it down to its age, or it's generally put it down to age. But is it always age? Because if you're meditating, you'll notice that your memory is so much better. And why is that?
It's hard to remember if you're not present. If you're asleep at the wheel, it's hard to remember.
Great way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly there's a lot of evidence in terms of the neurophysiological research, and you know, there's studies to show cortical thickening in certain areas of the brain, but a lot of evidence that certain types of meditation really do support memory and brain health overall. You know, the protective cap of the telomeres, which is a biomarker of the impact of aging, is longer for those who meditate. So there's some protective factors, certainly. And so I always say, you know, when you want outcomes with meditation, just touch them lightly, and then let them go, and allow meditation to just show you what's there to be seen. Because when we start putting certain expectations on meditation, that's oftentimes where, you know, people, you know, start to use meditation for more striving and proving. But, you know, we want to allow meditation to just sort of be as it is, and, you know, support more.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, I've been meditating now, gosh, nearly for 20 years. And at first you understand little things. It's those little things that at least keep you coming back to sit and practice. But in the long run, you see how many things improve. But most of all, it is your relationship with yourself, and then your relationship with the world as yourself.
Yeah. So the two wings are awareness and compassion. So that's what, you know, really what meditation supports, those two wings towards really awakening, awareness and compassion. Yeah.
Yeah. So powerful. So we have some questions from people who are watching, and I'd like to open it up to the floor. So the first one we have is from Helen. How do I effectively assert my need to take care of myself to my family?
Yeah. So fundamentally, you're talking about, like, how do I articulate and hold my boundary around, you know, whatever is needed for self-care. And I think the first part is really about, you know, just contemplating, taking some time to kind of contemplate, well, what's getting in the way? Am I holding a belief around my own self-care that may be, you know, sort of being communicated in certain ways? So I would just take some time to think about, how do I honestly feel about my own self-care? And am I Am I communicating that clearly to those in my life? And sometimes, we need to hold a pretty strong no, because other people are really invested in us looking after them. Right? It's just a natural tendency. And so they're caught in a pattern as well. So anytime we can enter into compassionate, clear dialogue, then the hope is that we can make our way towards negotiating needs, so that everyone's needs are met. I hope that helps. It's very tricky. It's something I'm working on myself.
Yeah, and Michele, something that I've thought about a lot is when you find yourself in that sort of position of needing to assert yourself in your family, like you say, what if you haven't given yourself space to look after yourself first? Generationally, if you had a mother or role model who did not do as you would like to do, as in who did not care for themselves, who maybe was more traditional in their role, who knows, submissive, felt bad, saying no, felt she needed to be polite. How hard is it to reinvent that now? If you're trying to break away from your role model and be a new type of mum, a new type of...
Well, I think half the battle is just being consciously aware that there's that patterning. So often where we really get snagged is when we're not aware that we're carrying on that pattern of, self-denial. And so, once you're aware that you hold an intention to change that pattern, that's a very powerful thing, because then you can articulate it to yourself. And you can catch yourself as you're kind of falling into that internal download.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I noticed, when I first started going to therapy and really thinking about these things was that I didn't have the vocabulary at first. It takes time to know how to ask for space, to say, I need this for me. It doesn't just happen. And I mean, your book is full of that. But so much of the frustration of people who did not have a role model who taught them those words or that stance have to be brave and have to invent that,
Yeah, and I think there's a way to name this so that other people understand. When I'm looking after myself, when I'm able to get in that walk in nature, or the journal writing, or the time with my friend, then I can not only show up for myself, but I can show up for you in a way where I'm more present, right? So I want to be able to be my best, healthiest self, just as I want the same for you. So, and again, it just kind of comes down to really rooting into the fact that that's your sovereign right? That's your sovereign right to be able to care for yourself. And that's our first priority. And it doesn't have to mean that I think so often we have an internalized guilt around that somehow that's not okay. But, and so it's really about changing that thinking pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think like just the way you speak, and you have such a beautiful expression of it all, but also you have such great words. And if only I'd met you, 15 years earlier, I would have been so much better at doing that. But yeah, better late than never.
Thank you.
How people. From Jeanette, we have a question. What do I do to help soothe my soul in my heart center when traumas come and bubble up in the center of my heart? Oh, I know that feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I know that feeling too. And so I guess the question that I would ask is, what leaves you feeling resourced? What leaves you feeling resourced when you're having that feeling? So is there someone in your life that you can bring to mind that is supportive to you? Is there a symbol, a guide, a place that you've been that left you feeling supported and relaxed? Can you breathe in with the desire to take away that suffering and breathe out relief? So Tonglen meditation, breathing in with the desire to take away that suffering and send yourself vast relief. Just thinking about those times when you felt safe and nurtured, joy, drawing on those feelings that you've shored up inside yourself, and just send that relief to yourself in that moment. So resources.
And I feel like every meditation will help your heart in some way, because it's always aimed at calming everything down. It's very difficult when you get that really crushing feeling in your chest and you think you'll never be able to relax it, but you can. It just takes time. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to actually touch on the things that you've done, Michele. Like just recently you came back from Gampo Abbey in Nova Scotia, and who did you meet, and how did they help you open your heart?
Oh gosh, I mean, this, we need, how much time do we have? Do you have another hour?
Sum it up in 30 seconds.
Gampo Abbey, and I was in practice with the monastics there, the nuns and monks, and Annie Pema Chodron was there too. And I'm just so grateful to have been invited and to have been able to have that experience. And so I lived as a monastic for 8 days and really immersed myself in monastic life, which was so incredibly supportive and really kind of opened a doorway for me into, really seeing what the impact is of a dedicated path of really committing to the Dharma of Buddhism. And I'll just share with you one story. So Pema Chodron was teaching the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva, and we were having discourse, and I really didn't think that I would have time to have a sitting with her. She's a very, very busy schedule. And so I left her a note just requesting, I brought her an orchid, and I didn't know that she loved orchids so much. So I'm glad that intuitively, I just felt that that's what I wanted to bring her. And so she approached me to apologize and say, I'm so sorry that I'm not going to be able to meet with you. And so she misunderstood. She thought I wanted a sitting, and really all I wanted to do was to give her this orchid in gratitude and thanks. And so her, the person who organizes her schedule kind of arranged for me to be able to pop in. And so I did. And she's a very gracious and kind, and really embodies this compassionate sweetness. And so it was a lovely exchange, and I was ready to kind of go back to my retreat cabin. And she asked if I would walk her to her retreat cabin, which was afforded us an opportunity to just spend some time together. And during that time, we talked about just the sweetness and the simple things, the flowers that were sprouting up, and the change in the weather, and the hairs that were on the ground that were coming out, finally, and just really delighting in the simple things, which I think we in Western culture have a very difficult time doing, just being so fully in the moment with the beauty that is really before us all the time, no matter what. And so she was really delighting in this orchid, but very worried about it because it's very, very windy there. It's super rugged in that area of Nova Scotia, well, that area of our planet. And suddenly this massive gust of wind came down on us. And Annie Pema put her arms around me, and there we were hugging one another with this delicate orchid between us, and the wind just pounding on us. And I had this sort of sense of, just protecting the inner sweetness that we all have. We all have that inner goodness. And there we were, just holding each other, protecting the sweetness of this orchid. And I also want to kind of add,
fully in the moment.
And I had this sort of this feeling of, how is this actually happening? This is so beautiful. Like, it was giving me goosebumps.
Yeah. And you'll never forget that, that's something like that draws you right in. The way you describe it is so great. And then there you are, and that's a memory that is just, it's so clear to me. It's so colorful to me, the way you describe it. So you must have been, fully in that moment. And and
I had a moment earlier today where I was really caught in a storyline in my head, and I just sort of cut the storyline, remembering that moment, and looked around, look around. And so it's so helpful. So helpful.
I respect, you've done so many incredibly interesting retreats. You've been on so many journeys to really kind of get to the middle of things, to research wisdom from other cultures, to really push yourself, into silent retreats and face your fears. And at the same time, it's those same things that you go so far away to bring you back to the present moment. And it can just be the simplest things, like an orchid. And for me, I think that's why I have such strong feelings about animals in the natural world, because luckily I was brought up with a great love of animals around me. And sharing a moment in the presence of another species is always in the present. It's an intelligence that is, and an experience that is unlike anything. And interestingly, after you told Jeanette how to soothe her heart when she has stress in her heart center, and you said, do something simple, find something that helps you feel better, be resourced, you said, right? Think of the things that make you feel better and see if you can sit in that. And Jeanette actually came back and she said, that makes sense. I'll do that next time. I think whenever I think of my dog or swimming with dolphins, it helps me heal. Thank you for the healing reminder, Michele. Yeah. And, and then you speak of orchids, like I love walking in the forest, but in all that, we've had incredibly grey weather here in Vancouver. It's been a very, very long grey winter, and I know it's been pretty rough in Canada and elsewhere in the north. And I am so obsessed with flowers. I've been planting flowers, and in the morning when I wake up, and just before I get hit with that list of things that I have to do that would start that anxiety, I think, what would make me feel joyful right now? What is a simple thing that I find joyful? And I just think, I want to go outside and look at my flower box. It does make me joyful.
Yeah. And so often we're looking for those big macro moments. So if we can really just have that moment of appreciation and awe, for the simple things, without needing the big bang, and
it can start you off in the right direction. That can be the start of your day, and then you kind of go, everything else just doesn't need to be so dramatic and stressful.
Yeah. Wise.
Michele, thank you so much. We've reached the end of our hour. I wanted to thank you for all the wonderful things that you've said today, for the wonderful book When Women Rise that you've written, which people are going to be in for a huge treat when they get to read and listen to your meditations. I also wanted to leave you with something before Jacob comes in at the end, which is from your book. Which is very, very important. You say, there are milder and more extreme levels of anxiety. If you feel that anxiety is affecting your mental health, it might be time to reach out for conventional medical treatment. And if your concerns are unmet, reach out to someone else and keep reaching out until you're heard. Mm-hmm. And, that really speaks to me as well, because again, talking about how you have to invent new vocabulary and be brave to become an all new role model. It's hard to keep reaching out until you find the person that really hears you. And women are very good at going, oh, well, I don't want to shout too loud and bother anybody, but you need to bother people, speak up until you're heard.
Yeah. Keep banging on doors. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that last piece, because
it's your survival that's at stake.
Meditation and nature are not an answer to everything all the time. So, sometimes we need more conventional types of treatment, especially if anxieties become more debilitating and is really impacting your ability to have a full life.
Yeah, exactly. And I, like I said, I think if I'd met you 15 years ago, or if I had known you were out there, I would have saved myself a lot of sleepless nights. Because I shut up after a while. I should have shouted louder back when I had chronic insomnia. But here we are now, and so anybody who is listening to this, watching this, and has friends who they know might benefit from When Women Rise, this could be a great catalyst to a better life, a happier soul, a less stressed heart, and great sleep, and much more in the present moment.
Most importantly.
Thanks, Michele, and I'll hand over to Jacob. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both for joining us tonight, and for this illuminating conversation on this most empowering and inspiring book. It provides so many tools for balance and coming home to ourselves. And I just wish to remind everybody, the book, When Women Rise, Everyday Practices to Strengthen Your Mind, Body, and Soul, is available from Banyen.com. That's BANYEN.com. And that you can learn more about Michele Kambolis' work at michelekambolis.com. And you can follow Nat Boltt on Instagram at Nat Boltt. On behalf of Banyen Books, thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you, Nat Boltt and Dr. Kambolis, for joining us.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Branches of Wisdom, a podcast of Banyen Books and Sound, Canada's spiritual and healing resource since 1970. Our podcast producer is Jacob Steele. The show is edited by Abdo Habani. Watch all our conversations on YouTube by searching for Banyen Books, or listen on your favorite podcast platform. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews and comments. We love to hear from you. For all our live events, books, and more, visit us at banyen.com.